The old county jail sat like a scar on the edge of Dry Creek, its stone walls bruised by years of storms and silence. Inside, the corridor smelled of rust and sweat, thick with a quiet that felt older than the town itself. Sheriff Isaac Ward had seen fights, riots, even a stabbing or two, but he'd never seen Rocco, the K-9 who trusted no one but him, lose control like this. The dog snarls echoed through the concrete halls, claws scratching deep grooves into floor outside cell 6. Something in that room didn't belong. If you enjoy slow-burn thrillers with raw emotion and shocking turns, you might consider following along for more stories like this one. The storm outside had crawled in heavy, pressing its fingers against the bars and rattling the tin roof above the block. Water dripped from some leak that no one ever fixed, hitting concrete with a steady tick-tick-tick. Sheriff Isaac Ward tightened his coat around him as he turned down the hall, his boots sending hollow echoes. Rocco's barking had already shaken half the building awake. The deputies, young, jittery, not yet ground down by years of night duty, stood wide-eyed near the guard station, their flashlights dancing in nervous hands. Hell's got into him? Deputy Clay muttered, voice tight. Rocco doesn't spook, Isaac said flatly, though inside he felt his ribs tighten. The dog lunged against a leash, teeth bared, frost spraying in the yellow light. His body trembled, not with fear, but with the kind of urgency that meant he'd scented something alive, something wrong. Cell 6 sat midway down the row. Its occupant, a man named Daniel Price, leaned against the back wall, arms folded, a half-smile carved across his face. Price had been picked up 2 weeks earlier for breaking into an old farmstead. Nothing violent, just a thief, the kind Dry Creek saw too often. Quiet your mutt, Sheriff, Price called, voice dry as sandpaper. Ain't nothing here but me. Isaac pulled Rocco back, but the dog only grew more vicious, claws raking at the bars, throat raw with fury. His eyes never left the bed pushed up against the far wall. Something about it felt wrong. Isaac unlocked the cell. Clay stiffened. Sheriff protocol. You want to tell him to stop? Isaac nodded at the K-9, whose teeth snapped so hard sparks of spit sprayed through the air. Clay said nothing. Isaac stepped inside. The cell smelled of mildew and cigarettes, the kind of air that clung to the lungs. Daniel Price raised both hands, mocking surrender. Check all you want. You'll find I keep my sins out in the open. Isaac knelt beside the cot. Rocco's growl rose an octave, vibrating the walls. The sheriff gripped the metal frame and dragged it back. It screeched against the floor, the sound splitting the storm's howl outside. And then the smell hit him. Rot, sweet and heavy, crawling into the throat, forcing the stomach to rebel. Clay gagged. Jesus Christ. Isaac froze, his fingers tightening on the cot frame. The shadows beneath the bed moved, not like rats, not like tricks of light, but like something alive shifting just enough to remind him it was there. Price smiled wider. Told you, Sheriff. Some things best left where they're lying. The uneasy passed. 2 days earlier, Isaac had sat in his kitchen, staring at a chipped mug of black coffee. Rain hammered the window. On the table, an unopened letter from the state parole board glared at him. He'd been offered transfer years ago, better pay, fewer ghosts. But Dry Creek was in his blood, and leaving meant admitting his father's sacrifices had been for nothing. His daughter, Emily, 16 and restless, had thrown the letter in the trash when she found it. You're not leaving me here, she'd said, her voice a blade of anger. Not after Mom. He hadn't answered. Some wounds didn't stop bleeding, even when wrapped in silence. Now, standing in cell 6, that same silence pressing again. He could feel Emily's eyes on him, though she wasn't here. He could hear his father's voice, sharp as the belt he used when Isaac broke curfew. Don't back down. Don't flinch. You're Ward blood. The cot shuddered in his grip. Something scraped beneath it. Under the bed. He pulled. The bed skidded fully aside. The deputy's flashlight snapped toward the dark gap underneath. And there it was. A bundle. Cloth, filthy and stiff, wrapped tight with cord. From one end, something pale jutted out. Something unmistakably human. Clay swore. That's a... Shut up, Isaac barked. The thing twitched. Not a corpse. Not yet. Isaac dropped to one knee, pulling at the bindings. The cloth peeled back in damp layers, each one carrying a stench that made his eyes water. Inside lay a girl, maybe 12, her lips cracked, her skin raw from rope burns. Her eyes open a fraction, glassy but alive. God Almighty, Isaac whispered. Rocco went silent. Just a low whine now, trembling in the heavy air. Price leaned against the wall, his smirk carved deeper. Guess you wanted a place to sleep. Clay surged forward, fist raised. Isaac caught his arm. Don't. Not yet. The girl tried to speak, but only a dry rasp came. Isaac turned, voice cold steel. Get water. Get Doc Marlin. Now! Clay bolted, boots hammering the hall. Isaac cradled the girl carefully. She flinched at his touch, her eyes darting not to him, but at Price. Fear flooded them so violently it made Isaac's stomach knot. How long? Isaac asked, his voice low. Price shrugged. Time runs strange in here. Could be hours. Could be weeks. Ask her when she learns how to talk again. Isaac fought the urge to slam him into the wall. But Price wasn't just a thief anymore. Whatever this was, it was bigger, darker. The storm outside roared, wind battering against the bars. Rocco whined again, pressing close to Isaac's leg. The girl clutched at his shirt, whispering something too faint to catch. He bent close. Her voice cracked like brittle paper. Not him. Isaac froze. Who? Her eyes shifted, slow and terrified, toward the ceiling, toward the vents that ran above every cell. And then the lights flickered. Fractures! By the time Doc Marlin arrived, an old man in muddy boots with hands that trembled more than they should, the girl was barely conscious. They carried her out on a stretcher cobbled from 2 planks and a blanket. Her breaths came shallow, but steady enough to keep hope alive. Price whistled as they passed, a low, tuneless sound. Guess I'll be needing a new bed. Isaac stopped at the bars. You so much as breathe wrong, and I'll make sure no jury hears your side. Price tilted his head, eyes bright with something between madness and glee. Sheriff, I didn't put her there, but I knew she was waiting. Been listening to her for days. She whispers in the dark, tells stories. You're sick. Maybe, but you're the one who opened the bed. Isaac's grip whitened around the bars. For a moment, he thought of driving his fist through the smirk, but Rocco nudged his leg, grounding him. Outside, the storm began to break. Thunder rolled away into silence. But inside the jail, silence didn't bring peace. It only made the questions louder. Who was the girl? Who put her there? And what did she mean? Not him. Closing beat of Chapter 1. That night, long after the girl had been taken to the clinic and the deputies sent home, Isaac sat alone in his office. The clock ticked. The storm left the air damp, carrying the smell of wet earth. The cot from cell 6 sat dismantled in the evidence room. The ropes lay sealed in bags. And still, Isaac felt it, the weight of her whisper pressing down. Not him. He poured himself a glass of bourbon, his hand trembling more than he wanted to admit. The glass clinked against his teeth. Rocco lay at his feet, restless, ears twitching toward the jail's darkened halls. Somewhere in those halls, the wind moved through the vents with a sound too much like breathing. Isaac closed his eyes, but the storm never really left. The storm broke into silence by dawn, leaving the air washed raw and heavy. Sheriff Isaac Ward hadn't slept. He sat at his desk, his coat draped over the chair back, eyes red from bourbon and restless thoughts. The phone rang once in the night, Doc Marlin's cracked voice assuring him the girl was alive, sedated, but not out of danger. Still, she had whispered something before drifting into fevered dreams. Not him. And then she'd lifted one trembling finger toward the ceiling. Isaac hadn't been able to shake it. The jail was quiet now, the kind of quiet that pressed on the skull until every creak in the walls felt like a voice. Rocco lay by the door, ears pricked, head lifting at every soft thump from above. The clinic. By mid-morning, Isaac drove out to Dry Creek's only clinic, a squat brick building that smelled of iodine and pine cleaner. The girl lay under thin sheets, her lips chapped, her wrists marked deep with bruises that told of ropes bound too tight for too long. Emily was there, despite his orders to stay home. She sat on a plastic chair by the bed, sketchbook in hand. When Isaac entered, she looked up, her eyes tired but blazing with that familiar, stubborn fire. "You don't tell me what to do any more," she said before he could open his mouth. Isaac exhaled through his nose, too drained to argue. "How is she?" "She wakes up sometimes. Just stares at the ceiling, like she hears something none of us do. She won't look at me, won't look at anyone." Doc Marlin shuffled in, his glasses fogged, white coat stained with coffee. "She's dehydrated, malnourished, and terrified out of her wits. Won't give a name, won't say where she came from. But she's strong. Stronger than most would be after that hell." Isaac stepped closer, watching the girl's chest rise and fall. A whisper of breath, fragile but steady. "Did she say anything else?" Marlin hesitated. "She murmurs at night, words I can't catch. But one thing I swear I heard clear. She said, 'They're still here.'" The room chilled. Emily hugged her sketchbook tighter. "Who's still here?" Marlin shook his head, as if shaking off a shadow. "Might just be fever talk. But Sheriff, whatever put her under that bed, it's not finished with her. The prison again." Isaac drove back with a weight on his chest heavier than any badge. The jail loomed like it always had, a squat relic on the town's edge, its stone walls patched with moss and scars of rain. He parked, stepped out, and felt the air colder than it should have been for late summer. Inside, cell 6 stood open, the bed gone. The space looked ordinary now, as though nothing monstrous had ever been dragged from its shadow. But Rocco froze at the doorway, hackles raised, eyes fixed on the vent above. A faint rattle echoed through it, like fingers brushing against metal. Isaac's throat tightened. He pulled his flashlight, shined it up. The vent slats gleamed with dust, nothing more. But Rocco barked, sharp and furious, echo bouncing down the corridor. Price, still locked in his cell across the block, laughed. He hears them, too. Isaac turned, jaw tight. "Shut your mouth." Price leaned against the bars, his smile pale in the dim light. "You think you found the worst of it? That was just bait, Sheriff. Something to see if you'd look. And you did. Now you'll hear them all night. Scratching. Whispers in the dark. They crawl the vents like veins." Isaac stepped closer, voice low and taut. "Who put her there?" "I told you already." "Not me." Price spread his arms. "But I listened, and she told me stories you wouldn't believe. Stories about this place. About you." Isaac felt his blood spike. "What about me?" Price tilted his head. "That you're too blind to see the rot under your feet." The sound came again, then soft, sliding from above. Both men froze. Not rats. Too heavy. Too deliberate. The deputies doubt. Later, Isaac called his deputies into break room. Clay, jittery as ever, and Sarah Bell, sharp-eyed, new to the job but already smarter than most. Sarah leaned forward over the table, voice low. "Sheriff, with respect, you've been here too long. This place gets inside people's heads. Makes them hear things." "I didn't imagine a girl under a cot," Isaac snapped. Her jaw tightened. "No, but how she got there? Maybe it's bigger than one man. Maybe there's more people involved than you want to admit." Clay swallowed hard, his hand tapping the table. "You think in a ring? Trafficking." Sarah's eyes didn't leave Isaac's. "It fits, doesn't it? Small town. Old prison with vents running everywhere. A perfect place to hide what nobody wants found." Isaac hated the way her words fit, like jagged pieces clicking into place. Clay leaned back, pale. But who in their right mind? People aren't in their right minds when money's involved. Sarah cut in. Isaac stood, chair scraping. "We keep this between us. No rumors. No talk outside this room. We find proof before we accuse anyone." Sarah crossed her arms. "What if proof finds us first?" Home shadows. That night, Isaac returned home to find Emily asleep on the couch, sketchbook open on her chest. He lifted it gently and froze at what she'd drawn. Dark vents, thin arms reaching through them. A girl's hollow eyes staring out. His daughter stirred. "She told me." Emily mumbled, half dreaming. "She whispered when you weren't there. Said they moved through the walls." Said you won't believe until you hear them yourself. Isaac's skin crawled. He tucked the blanket around her, but his hands shook. When he turned off the light, the house settled into quiet. But lying awake, Isaac swore he heard it. The faint scrape of metal above, too close, too slow. The betrayal. The next evening, he returned to the jail to find Clay waiting at his office door. Face tight, lips pale. "Sheriff, I gotta tell you something." Isaac frowned. "Spit it out." Clay hesitated, eyes darting to the corridor where Sarah's desk sat empty. "Sarah, she's been asking questions outside. Went to the state police. Told them what we found. Said she didn't trust we'd handle it right." Isaac felt heat rise in his chest. "She what?" "She said you're too close. Too tied to this town. She doesn't think you'll let it burn if it needs to." Isaac's fist clenched on the doorknob. Betrayal cut deeper than any blade. He'd brought Sarah in, trusted her sharp mind. And now she'd gone around him, painted him as weak. Rocco growled low, ears pricked toward the hall. "Where is she now?" Isaac asked. Clay swallowed, went back to cell 6. Said she wanted to listen for herself. Isaac's blood chilled. The vents! They found her flashlight first, rolling on the floor outside cell 6, its beam cutting a thin stripe of light across the wall. "Sarah?" Isaac's voice echoed, too loud in the empty block. No answer. Rocco barked, claws scrambling against the floor as he lunged toward the vent above. His teeth clamped the grate, shaking it with desperate fury. And then, from inside the vent, came the sound, not scratching, not sliding. A voice, a child's voice, whispering Sarah's name. Clay went pale as wax. "Oh, God, Sheriff, they're in there." Isaac's flashlight beam trembled as he lifted it. Dust motes danced. The vent slats rattled as though something crawled just out of sight. Then a hand, small, pale, raw with rope burns, pressed against the metal from inside. Isaac staggered back, heart hammering. The whisper grew louder, filling the corridor, voices overlapping. Children's voices, dozens of them, tangled together. Rocco barked until his throat went raw. But the voices didn't stop. They rose into a chorus, not screams, not cries, just whispers, endless, crawling through every vent in the prison until the walls themselves seemed to breathe. And Sarah was nowhere to be found. The voices haunted the corridors long after the storm outside had passed, echoing through vents that hadn't carried air in decades. Sheriff Isaac Ward stood rooted in the half-light, Rocco growling low at his feet, Clay trembling beside him. The last whisper had been his name, a child's voice calling it from inside the walls. Now silence. Clay licked his lips, words shaking loose. "Sheriff, this ain't natural. We gotta get out. Call the feds, call anyone." Isaac's jaw locked. "Not yet. Not yet." Clay's voice cracked. "Sarah's gone. Vanished. The girl under the bed." She pointed to the vents. Price knew. And now this? If we stay, we're next. Isaac's gaze swept the vents, the shadows, the peeling paint of cell 6. Fear gnawed at his ribs, but under was something harder, older, the same voice that had driven him since his father's beatings, since Emily's mother walked out, since the badge weighed heavier than his own name. "Don't flinch. Don't run. Ward blood stands." "We find her," Isaac said. Clay stared at him, disbelief etched deep. "And if we don't—" Isaac didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward Price's cell, the smiling prisoner. Price was waiting, always waiting. His grin spread slow, like a knife being drawn. "Lose something, Sheriff?" he asked. "Or should I say someone?" Isaac slammed the bars with both hands, metal ringing. "Where is she?" Price leaned closer, eyes gleaming. "I told you, they crawl the vents. They always have. Little ones, big ones. You just never listened. You're feeding me poison. Maybe I'm the only one who hears them clearly." His smile thinned. "You should have left the bed alone, Sheriff. That girl was just the first crack. Now the whole thing's splitting open." Isaac's stomach turned. Price wasn't scared. He was entertained, as though the jail itself were putting on a show for him. Behind Isaac, Clay muttered, "Sheriff, maybe he's right. Maybe this place is cursed." No. Isaac snapped, spinning. There's an explanation. There has to be. But even as he said it, the air in the cell block shifted, carrying with it a draft that smelled of damp earth and something sweet, rotting. Rocco whined, pressing against Isaac's leg, into the walls. The maintenance hatch to the vent system hadn't been opened in years, maybe decades. Rust ate the hinges, dust thick as ash clung to the edges. Isaac pried it open with a crowbar, Clay standing back, pale and useless. The dark mouth yawned wide. Cold air poured out, carrying whispers that slithered straight into his ears. Isaac, he steadied his breathing, snapped his flashlight on, and crawled inside. Rocco padded close behind, claws scraping metal. Clay hesitated, then cursed under his breath and followed. The vent was narrow, forcing him onto hands and knees. Dust choked the air. Every clang of movement echoed like a drumbeat. "Sheriff," Clay whispered behind him. "What if she's already gone?" "Then we bring her back anyway," Isaac muttered. "No one disappears in my jail." But the truth clawed at him. People had disappeared before. Old stories whispered around town, names that surfaced and sank without explanation. He'd written them off as runaway kids, drifters who never stayed. But maybe the rot had always been here. The chamber. After 20 yards of crawling, the vent opened into a hollow space. Isaac dropped down first, boots hitting dirt. His flashlight cut across stone walls, crumbling mortar. They weren't in the prison anymore. They were under it. A chamber stretched out, low ceiling, damp with years of seepage. Old beams sagged. Chains hung from hooks in the walls, rusted but real. And there, against the far side, Sarah sat slumped, wrist bound, head lolling. "Sarah." Clay stumbled forward, dropping to his knees. He cut the ropes, shook her shoulders. She stirred, eyes fluttering open, lips trembling. They wanted me here." Isaac crouched beside her, voice taut. Who wanted you?" Her gaze lifted, glassy with terror, toward the shadows beyond the beam of light. And then Isaac heard it, the shuffle of feet. Dozens of them, small, uneven. The whispers rose again, circling the chamber, layered and inhuman. Stay with us." The revelation. From the shadows emerged figures. Children, or what looked like children. Their skin was gray with dust, their eyes hollow pits that caught the light like glass. Rope marks ringed their wrists. Some mouths moved without sound, lips split and broken. Clay staggered back, choking on his own breath. "Dear God!" Sarah sobbed, clutching Isaac's sleeve. "They're trapped. They've always been trapped." Isaac's light swept the chamber, catching carvings etched deep into stone. Names. Dozens, maybe hundreds, scratched by desperate hands. The jail wasn't just a building. It was a graveyard built over a pit, a place where children had been hidden, starved, silenced. And the whispers, they weren't echoes. They were voices that never left. Isaac's throat closed. He remembered the missing posters from his youth, the rumors no one chased. How his father used to say, "Don't ask questions you can't carry the answers to." His father had known. Warred blood had stood, but it stood on rot. The collapse. The children moved closer, their whispers rising into a storm. Clay panicked, firing his pistol. The shots ripped the chamber, bullets sparking off stone. The figures didn't flinch. "Stop!" Isaac roared, grabbing Clay's arm. "They're not." But then the ceiling groaned. Dust cascaded. The chamber shook with years of weight, finally giving way. "Out!" Isaac shouted. "Back to the vent, now!" Clay scrambled, dragging Sarah. Isaac covered them, Rocco snarling at the advancing figures. The ground split, a beam crashed, stone falling in thunderous cracks. The whispers rose into screams, not of anger but of pain, as if the collapse itself tore them apart. Isaac shoved Sarah up through the vent, Clay hauling her in. He pushed Rocco next, the dog yelping as claws scrambled on metal. The chamber caved, stone and dirt swallowing the voices in one last, shattering cry. Isaac pulled himself up, barely clearing before the passage sealed behind them. Aftermath. They stumbled out into the corridor of the jail, covered in dust, coughing, shaken to the bone. Sarah leaned against the wall, face pale. They weren't alive. Not really. But they weren't gone either. Clay collapsed onto the floor, staring blankly. I fired point blank. They didn't bleed. Isaac leaned against the bars, chest heaving. The jail was silent now, truly silent. The whispers had ended, but the names carved in stone burned behind his eyes. He thought of the girl in the clinic, of her whisper. Not him. She had been right. Price hadn't hidden her there. Someone else had. Maybe many. And the jail had swallowed their sins for generations. Ward blood had stood, but it had stood blind. The quiet resolution. 2 nights later, Isaac sat outside on his porch, the air cool, crickets humming. Emily sat beside him, sketchbook on her lap, untouched. You going to tell me? She asked softly. Isaac stared into the dark. Some truths don't belong in daylight. That's not fair. No, he admitted. It isn't. She looked at him, eyes glistening. Are you leaving Dry Creek? He thought of the letter in the trash, of the jail, of the carved names. He thought of the voices whispering his name in the dark. No, he said finally, not until the last name is spoken. Emily was silent for a long moment, then reached out, slipping her hand into his. The night was quiet, peaceful almost, but Isaac knew the silence wasn't empty. It carried every whisper the walls had stolen, every name the town had forgotten, and as long as he wore the badge, he would carry them too,